Jumping back into the conversation now, looking at our free agency portion of today's show, right? Shifting our focus now a little bit past the Super Bowl, right? Where we're probably still going to have some discussions on it, but still also looking a little bit forward to what's next, right? Because the NFL season and the whole entirety of the NFL schedule doesn't really stop, right? Free agency will be here before you know it, and then you're talking about all the latest big signings and things like that, and it just moves in an instant. So with that in mind, with Davante Adams now in our focus, and with his time in New York seemingly coming to an end, it would also be logical that we start talking about some potential new destinations for Davante Adams because connected to his future is Aaron Rodgers' future, and we already know pretty much that the Jets have told Aaron that they're planning on moving on from him. So with that, it leads us back to Davante Adams, right? With the whole premise of Davante Adams being in New York mainly was because Aaron and Davante wanted to play together again, right? Going back to their Green Bay days and the great connection and relationship that they have, right? It felt like Aaron wanted Davante there, and Davante's time in Las Vegas was coming to a very stressful end, right? With the poor form that they were on, and if you saw the receiver series on Netflix, you saw how down Davante Adams got at some point in that series. So a move was becoming more inevitable, and he ended up going to New York. And still, it wasn't enough to save the Jets' season. Obviously, the entire thing was a disaster. So now with Aaron essentially moving on, right? It feels like Davante Adams doesn't really have a place there anymore, right? Because he went there to play with Aaron. So I believe Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji really just also want to build and make this team a lot in their likeness. And not to say that Davante Adams doesn't 100%, fit into what they want to do, but it just feels like they just want to get rid of everything from last year, right? Apart from the cornerstone pieces, right, on this team, right? The younger pieces also. It just feels like anybody that came in the last year or two, or even Davante just halfway through the season, they just kind of, it feels like they would rather just push everything else out and start from ground zero as much as possible. So it's important to remember that the Jets really went after Davante, like I said, halfway through the year. So the connection there with the organization is still relatively fresh, and now you bring in two new guys that essentially weren't there to bring Davante in. It doesn't really boost the chances of him staying anymore, right? Because they maybe didn't even want him there, right? If you really think about it. So it seems like there's going to be a lot more house cleaning, if you will, with New York, and getting all the stuff out of the organization that maybe don't fit into Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji's plans. But with that in mind, with the speculation already starting pretty much with Davante and Aaron and what their futures are going to look like, ESPN reported recently about Davante Adams. It was actually Jeremy Fowler that pointed this out. In regards to Davante Adams' future, Jeremy Fowler said, "The Jets must address the future of receiver Davante Adams, whose 38.3 cap hit is untenable. A source told me Adams is intrigued by a return to the West Coast and would be open to potentially joining teams such as the Los Angeles Rams or the Los Angeles Chargers if he got released." And Jeremy Fowler also threw in there the 49ers because of the fact that Davante Adams grew up in North California. So from that report, from the sources connected to Jeremy Fowler, it seems like, with a potential release in mind, I would say I feel like that would be the easiest way for the Jets to kind of move on from Davante Adams. It feels like all those teams out west, right? The teams that have already been linked with Davante even before this year, even going back to last offseason. I know we talked about the trade rumors and the sources and reports around Deebo Samuel, and even the Raiders. The trade talks with Davante going back to last offseason started pretty early, right? Even before training camp and stuff like that, right? I know Davante even came out and kind of gave a brief statement or answered the question about how committed he was to the Raiders. And, he gave that answer and he ended up getting traded away, obviously. But I know this was something that was still out there, even going back to last offseason. So now, with the history there and all the connections, I know all the California teams were part of this story essentially because of the roots there for Davante Adams and the connection to the 49ers, the Rams, and now the Chargers, right? Because they're also building something special there, it seems like. So, it's been something that Davante Adams has been linked to, even going back to his time when he was also leaving Green Bay, despite him being 32 years old now. You can tell he's still got a lot to give, right? And I think that's by no means like he's just washed or anything like that. I think he's been in two very challenging spots with Las Vegas and Derek going there to obviously play with Derek, and then he gets shipped out right away, and now he goes over to play with Aaron, and he essentially is told by the organization that they want to move on from him. So the same thing happened to Davante in both times he decided to move. So now it just feels like instead of going back and playing with a former teammate or former quarterback, it seems like Davante has something else in mind, right? Talking about where he would potentially want to go, somewhere where he's comfortable, but also some teams that are very exciting to kind of speculate about when you're talking about the idea of adding a guy like Davante Adams, right? And in my opinion, I think the Rams would be the perfect fit for him, in my opinion, if I had to choose, right? It feels a lot like Odell Beckham Jr. going to the Rams. And I know Davante's not coming off of a major injury, and Davante's playing at a higher level than Odell was around the same age, or at least around the same age when he joined the Rams. So it does remind me of it though, because just of the idea of a veteran, established household name at wide receiver coming into the Rams, and even better, like I just said with Davante, it feels like has a lot more to give still at this point than maybe Odell did at that time, getting over that injury and stuff like that. So Davante and the idea of him playing with Puka Nacua or Kyron Williams and a very exciting young defense and Matthew Stafford as well, being coached by Sean McVay, I think the Rams would be such an exciting opportunity for Davante Adams. And then you also have the fact that Cooper Kupp has been told that he is going to be traded, right? The Rams told him that they are going to be seeking a trade for him. So essentially Davante would slide right into that spot, and the Rams wouldn't really lose too much at all at that spot. And to some people, it might even be an upgrade. So I think the idea of him joining that team would be awesome, essentially because Matthew Stafford and Davante Adams' contract are also on similar timelines, right? I think Matthew has maybe a year or two left in him, max, because I think he's like 36 years old or something like that. And Davante Adams has 2 years left on his contract. So if you line it up and you get the most out of these next 2 years, right, you can essentially move on from Stafford if that's something that he wants to do. And also, Davante Adams would become a free agent at 34 years old. And if you don't want to sign him back and don't want to agree to maybe another large extension, then you don't have to do it also. So that's another reason why I feel like the timelines and the timing of everything feels almost too good to be true now for the Rams and Davante Adams. But it's not only the Rams, but also the Los Angeles Chargers, who wouldn't be a bad destination either, who I've been dying for them to get another wide receiver next to Ladd McConkey, and they're a little bit more green, right? Because, Justin Herbert is younger. Jim Harbaugh just came back to the NFL. Their defense was playing at a very good level, and they're still just kind of getting established a little bit, right? With this new idea, this new regime coming in with Jim Harbaugh. So I still like the fit. I wouldn't mind the fit, but with the Rams, I feel like it's a little bit more like the stars are aligning, right? That sort of feeling with that situation with the Rams. But I wouldn't be upset about the Chargers either. I think they would love to have a guy in there like Davante Adams. Getting him with Justin Herbert would be a fantastic partnership. But that's only still speculation. And the other team is the 49ers, right? They stick out because there's always been those links of Davante going back and playing in San Francisco, and they're also moving on from Deebo Samuel, but it doesn't make sense to kind of move on from his contract, but also just take up Davante Adams, who's making similarly to what Deebo Samuel was and on a similar contract as well. It seems kind of counterintuitive there, especially because they got to extend Brock Purdy, and that seems to be on their mind, their goal at this point in time. So it seems exciting, and I think he would be great alongside Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall. But with the finances and things that we're kind of seeing here with the 49ers, I don't know if it'll be a smooth transition, so to say. So I mean, it's not only those teams, quite honestly. I mean, you got other teams like Denver, like the Steelers would probably stick out as well to a lot of teams. But to me, it's all about the Rams. I think it's all about them and the kind of scenario that they have. Very intriguing over there. They're only probably a couple of secondary pieces away, and maybe a linebacker from really having as close to a complete team as possible. All they'd have to do essentially is stay as healthy as possible for them to get into the playoffs. And if they improve their secondary and their off-ball linebackers, I think this team really has the makings to do something special sooner rather than later. So that would be my ideal fit. And we've talked about Deebo and we've talked about Cooper Kupp already a little bit. And I feel like Davante would probably be the first wide receiver of that group of three to find himself in a new scenario, just because you're talking about Deebo and Cooper Kupp. I feel like they're more likely, or both of them are actually going to be traded. So finding a trade partner and agreeing to a compromise, it seems a little bit more tricky than the Jets, as I expect them to release Davante Adams. So that's why I feel like Davante, also out of that group of him, Deebo, and Cooper Kupp, could probably find a new home relatively soon, right? Maybe in the next month and a half or something. Whereas the other ones, I feel like a trade is probably going to be pushed back a little bit later. So, Davante, it looks like he's going to go back out west. That would be the spot where I would probably bet on him to return to. I would find it really hard to believe if he stayed in New York. I don't think that's happening. So we'll see where he goes. It feels like it's going to be in the state of California. So it's going to be the Chargers, the Rams, or the 49ers, I would hope, and I would guess at this point in time. But for right now, we're still going to speculate. We're still going to talk about the initial portion of the offseason with more rumors and reports linking this time the Las Vegas Raiders to their potential new starting quarterback in 2025. Who would that be? Is it going to be a good fit? And, what does it mean for the landscape of the NFL? We're going to answer all of that and answer your speculations when we return right after this.